Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is Piyush and this is video number 4 in the series Azure DevOps Zero to Hero. This particular video will be focusing on Azure DevOps build and release pipeline and everything about it. I'm sorry for slight delay in publishing this video as there were some technical difficulties and I had to basically re-record everything from scratch, but we are here now. So let's have a look at the agenda for today. All right, so I am in my GitHub repository. You should already have the link by now. If not, you know where to find it. And if you scroll down to day 4, which is what we're going to do now, build and release pipeline. For this entire demo, we'll be using a website which is YouTube clone. And I have forked this repo from Adrian Hasden. This is an amazing project created by him. So I have forked the repo and you will find the link of the repo in the description section as well. I'll show you what are the steps to perform and it will look something like this. This is a fully functioning website without database and the app tier because I wanted to focus more on build, release pipeline and all other things rather than the application itself. That is why I have taken a basic application, but it has to be real time. That's why YouTube clone. It has a YouTube API enable as well. So if you search anything over here, let's say tutorials with Piyush, it's returning the results of my website, all the videos that I have recently published, and it is near real time. I've recently crossed 13,000 subscribers. So thank you so much for that. Thank you so much for all your support and love. And yeah, so this is what you'll be using now. First, we'll provision a Azure App Service to host the website, which is a SaaS application. We'll discuss more on this. We'll then create a build pipeline using the Classic Editor. Classic Editor is really basic, easy to implement, and should be the first step if you are a beginner. But if you already aware about this, you can skip this step and move on to creating build pipeline using YAML. This is really important because this is what we'll be using for the entire course. And even if you are working in a company, if you are preparing for interview, this is what they ask the most. So no one really bothers much about the Classic Editor, but I will explain it to you for the sake of getting that basic knowledge about it. Right. Then we'll be looking into YAML pipeline structure like job, steps, stages, task, variables, triggers, build properties, agent, everything. Then we'll see how to publish the build artifacts from a build pipeline and use it in a release pipeline or in any other pipeline. Then we'll create the continuous deployment using release pipeline. Once that is done, we'll implement continuous delivery using deployment slots with the help of blue-green deployment, which is a deployment strategy. I will explain it to you what exactly it is and how do we implement it. Lastly, we'll look into deployment gates such as query work item and approval before the production deployment. So without wasting any time further, let's jump into the Azure portal and start with the first step, which is provisioning the Azure App Service to host the website. Okay, so I have logged into my Visual Studio Code. You can use the code editor of your choice, but the first step that we'll be doing is we'll be cloning the website that we'll be using as part of this demo. So I'll go to the repository once again, this one. Okay, I'll click over here and copy the clone URL. Go back and I'm inside my directory. First step that I'll do is I'll do a git init to initialize the git repository. Then I'll enter git clone. Okay, and the command itself. Cool. So my repository should be cloned. If I see I have a folder over here, I can just change directory into that folder. The help of cd. I'm inside the folder and now it has the source code of the application that we need. We'll be installing npm dependencies, we'll be building the project, and then at the end we'll serve the project with the help of Azure Web App. Now let's go ahead in our Azure repos and create a new project over there in which we'll be doing the demo. Log into dev.azure.com, create a new project. You can click over here, give it a name. Let's call it YouTube clone because this is what we're gonna do now. Hit create. It's at the right side again. Okay, the project has been created. Now go to repos over here. Again, if you have missed the first few videos of this series, I will highly recommend going through that because we have discussed all these basics over there. So I'm not explaining it again. So I'm keeping this as an assumption that you already know it, right? Okay, so now what we'll be doing is we have our blank repository over here, and the website that we have just cloned from the external GitHub repository will be uploading it over here. So I'll copy all the commands that is given over here, which says push an existing repository from command line. So there is a copy button on the right side, and the command, so it will add the remote repository as this one, and it will also push the code that is present in the local repository. So I'll go back into my VS Code. Let's clear the screen. So make sure you are inside the folder where your code resides. I'm already in that folder, and now I'll just paste the commands over here. It says remote origin already exists. So let's just double check with git remote show origin, and this website and this URL has already been added as a remote origin. So I'm good with that. Now what I'll need to do is I need to git push -u origin all. That means push the current code, the code that is residing in the local repository to the remote repository. -u is upstream and origin is the remote repository name. Okay. So I have pushed it. Is everything up to date, which is not what I was expecting. Oh, I made a mistake over here. So the origin that it is showing is the GitHub origin, but what we need is the Azure repos as the origin. Right? So what I'll do is I'll first clear the screen and I'll do git remote remove origin to remove the existing one. Okay, now let's add the origin again, which should be our Azure repos command. Okay, and now let's push it again. Okay, now it says it pushed everything. Now let's go back to our Azure repos and see if it actually did the push or not. So I'll just hit refresh, and our code is already uploaded over here. So this is what we needed. Now we have done some prereq setup. Now let's go back to our Azure portal and create the web app. So I have already logged in using the URL portal.azure.com, and you can go to App Service from here, or you can search it over here, or you can go from this menu. There are different options. Feel free to choose anything that you want. Azure App Service is nothing but a PaaS solution provided by Azure. I have already provided you the clear difference between IaaS, PaaS, and SaaS in the first video of this series. So in PaaS service, basically all the software updates, patching, operating system maintenance, all the administrative tasks and activities will be taken care by your cloud provider, which is Azure in this case, and you just focus on maintaining your application and code. So this is what you are responsible for as part of the shared responsibility model, and you don't have to worry about the hosting environment or the infrastructure itself. You provision it, it will provide you the runtime based on what you select based on your application, and it will take care of all the administrative tasks as well. So let's just click over here and create a new web app. And there are four options. First is a web app, then static web app plus database, or WordPress on app service. So we could use static web app for this case because we'll be using a React application, but let's go ahead with this one so that you get to know about what exactly is the web app and what are all the features, functionalities comes with it. So I'll click over to web app. Okay, and it'll ask me few details. First is subscription, which is what I've selected as the default subscription. Then resource group. Resource group, let's give it a name, day 4 underscore RG. Resource group is a container of all the resources within a subscription. So you can categorize it as per your environment, as per your project, or whatever you feel like. For example, this is the video of day 4. So I'll be provisioning all my resources inside this particular resource group, so that while deleting it, I just have to delete the resource group, and all the resources inside that resource group will be automatically deleted. So it is easier to maintain, easier to clean up, and um, one of the best practice. And Azure won't let you create any resource, well, most of the resource without a resource group. So this is kind of a prerequisite step. Then give it a name. Now, this web app has to be unique because it will come with a DNS itself. So let's give it a name. Let's call it Tech Tutorials with Piyush. And if you see this, it has a suffix attached to it, .azurewebsites.net. So my website will be accessible on Tech Tutorials with Piyush .azurewebsites.net. If you want, you can use the custom DNS as well, but this is what Azure provides us out of the box. Right now, there are three options to publish the app. First is code, Docker container, or static web app. Code, that means you can just upload your application code and it will provision the underlying runtime and spin up your app, host your app. You don't have to, provision an Nginx server or Apache server to host the web server. Right? It will be taken care by them, or you can run it as a Docker container. You can Dockerize your app and run it. So we'll look into the Docker container, Kubernetes, and all other implementation in the later videos of this course. But for now, we'll focus on just the standard runtime. Next, we can choose the runtime stack. So because this is our React application, right? And there are different options to choose from: .NET, Java, Node, PHP, Python. If you are using any other application, so you can go with the Docker container options to use your custom runtime, right? For now, we can use any latest version of Node. Let's use Node 18. And operating system. So this is the operating system of underlying host, Linux or Windows. Let's go with Linux, and region in which the application will be provisioned. So I'll choose the region that is nearest to me. So I'll choose Canada Central, but feel free to use region of your preference. Then there is an option of pricing plan, and the first is Linux plan. So app service plan is nothing but the hosting plan which has a pricing attached to it, like how many CPUs you need, how much memory you need, and how much disk you need, all those details. And every plan has a different pricing tier, so you can choose based on your requirement. The one that I have already created is this one, which is based on premium v3 POV3. It has basically 4 gigabytes of RAM, 1 V CPU. But if you are starting for the first time, you can hit over here, create new, and then give it a name. Let's call it ASP day 4, right? Hit OK. And now let's choose the different pricing option. Do not go with the default one. It might not fit your requirement. It could be oversized or undersized as per your requirement. So let's explore different pricing options by clicking over here where it says explore pricing plans. Once you do that, there are a lot of options. You can go with the first one, which is free F1, and it basically is free with 60 minutes per day, 1 GB memory, 1 GB remote storage. It is free to use, but with a maximum limit of 60 minutes per day. The one that I will be using is the premium V3 POV3, because the feature that I need, deployment slots, it's only available in the premium and standard version, which is not as part of the free version or any other version. So that's why I have gone ahead with the premium P3, right? So I'll select this one. Okay. And then the option is zone redundancy. So if you want your application to be deployed in multiple zones for high availability, you can do that. For now, we don't need it. So I'll just keep it disabled. Hit next. Database. I don't need a database at the moment. Hit next. Deployment. So you can set continuous deployment from here by using GitHub Actions, but we'll be using Azure DevOps. So that's why I have kept it disabled. We'll configure it on our own. Then hit next. Networking. Enable public access because we want our application to be accessible on public HTTP and HTTPS port. So that's why it is on. And the other option, keep it off as default. Now monitoring, we don't want application inside because it will just add some additional cost for logging and monitoring. So I'll just have to keep it disabled. Next tag, review and create. And once it reviews it, everything, and once it validates it, hit create. Right? It will take few seconds and the app will be provisioned. Once it is completed, you will see a message similar to this. Your deployment is complete, and you can hit over here where it says go to resource to go to your app service. So I have clicked on that, and Here are the details. Basically, you can browse your application from here, which says browse, or this is the default domain. If you click on that, your website will be accessible over here. So let's click over here. And this is the default page for the web app, right? So our application has started. It's just we have not deployed the code yet. That's why it is showing the default page, but that is okay. Then we have different option to stop the web app. There's a restart option, delete, refresh, and there's the option of swap, which we'll look into at the end of this video when we'll be working on deployment slots. So for now, just ignore this. Okay, so our infrastructure is ready. Now we have to deploy the application. So what we'll do is we'll go to our Azure DevOps pipeline over here and go to the pipeline section. And the first one will be creating the build pipeline. So this one over here, the third number one is the release pipeline. But for now, just go to the build pipeline. Okay, and hit create pipeline. Now it will ask you different options. Where is your code? This code is not your application code. Rather, this code is your pipeline code, right? So we'll look into the YAML pipeline later, but first let's start with the classic editor. So if you see at the bottom of the screen, it says use the classic editor to create a pipeline without the YAML. So this is what we'll be using now. So let's click over there. Now you have to select a source where your application code will reside. For us, it is Azure Repos. And you can choose other options like GitHub, GitHub Enterprise, Subversion, Bitbucket Cloud, or any other Git, which is supported by Azure DevOps. The team project is YouTube clone, this one. YouTube clone repository is the same one, the default repository that we created, YouTube clone, and the main branch. So once everything is fine, you can just hit continue. Now it will ask you to either select a template. If you select a template, it will add some predefined steps for you, or you can start with an empty job. So let me show you what will happen if you select a template. Let's say you have to deploy ASP.NET application on Azure Web App, right? So this is what you select over here. Click over there, hit apply. And on the left side, you see there are different steps populated like use NuGet, tool installer, NuGet restored, build solution, archive file, test assemblies, deployment, publish artifact, and a lot more. So this is the default steps that you get with the template, and you can customize it as per your requirement. Let's just go back. Okay, and start with an empty job so that we can add our custom steps, because I will walk you through all the phases and all the steps that is there. So click over empty job. Now it will ask us, first is the build pipeline. Build pipeline, this is at the pipeline level, right? This is the root level. If you have worked with Jenkins before, this is where your pipeline starts. If you work with any other tool, basically this is the first step. You define your pipeline. Name of the pipeline, YouTube clone CI, that's okay. Agent pool, so you can choose from Azure pipeline or the private agents. There are two type of agents in Azure DevOps. One is Microsoft hosted agent. The other is self-hosted agents or private agents. Again, if you have worked with Jenkins, this is similar to Jenkins Slave. If you have worked with GitLab or GitHub Actions, this is similar to Runners. If you have worked with any other tool, these are nothing but the build server where your code will be running. For example, let's say you have to compile a code. That code or that compilation step need an underlying runtime environment or an operating system to execute itself, to execute the command. So that underlying application environment is the agent, right? So Microsoft provide the Microsoft hosted agent, which is like a shared agent uh, provided by them, and it's shared by like every user. Or you can create your own agent. We'll see that in the later videos how you can create the self-hosted agent, but for now we'll be using the Microsoft hosted agent, which is the default one as well. Okay, now agent specification, like uh, on which operating system it will be running, right? So if you click over there, it has operating system, like it has Mac OS, from version 11 to 13, it has Ubuntu, Windows Server. You can choose any agent. That's not an issue. So I'll just go with Ubuntu. Okay. Then the next step, if you see, it's get sources. So basically, it will do a Git checkout to download your application code and your pipeline code. If it was a YAML pipeline, then there was pipeline code as well. But at this moment, we only have the application code. So it will do the checkout automatically with the help of this particular step. So again, select a source, um, project, repository, branch, everything, and there are some other options which you can check out. Once our application source code is checked out, the next step is this application has to run on agent. We did selected the agent at the pipeline level, but we can select the agent at the different stage level as well. Like there is a build stage, there is a test stage, there is a deployment stage. So we could select different agent for different stage as well. So if you go to this tab, which says agent job one, okay, it says agent pool inherited from pipeline. So that's why there is nothing selected, but it is inherited from the pipeline because at the pipeline level, we have used the Microsoft hosted agent. So it will use the same over here. And we don't have anything created as of now. So that's why there is no other option available. But you can definitely define that as per your requirement. Now let's add some steps in that. You see the plus sign over here, it says add a task to agent job one. So click over there. Now it will ask you different steps over here, right? You can select from these templates and it will create the steps for you, or you can write your own custom step as well. So the first step that will be running once the code is being checked out will be running npm install. So let's search for npm. Okay, there is this npm task available, add. And if you go over here, it will show you different options. So display name is npm install. Command is install, which is what will be running, and all other, let's see the different commands. We have npm ci, install, publish, or you can add your custom command as well. So this step, install, is fine. Working folder that contains your package.json. So if you see the three dots over here, our package.json is over here in the root directory itself. So let's keep it blank because this is what it will select at the moment. This step will execute the npm install command. Now click over here once again, and this time we'll be running in npm build. So select npm again, hit add, and then in place of install, we'll select custom, and the command and argument, you over here you can specify your custom commands. So I'll write run build. Okay, that's it. So our install is done, our build is done. Let's change the display name to npm build. Okay, now the next step that we'll be doing is we'll be publishing this build so that it can be used by the release pipeline or at the later stages, and then we'll deploy the build. Right, so click over here and search for publish. Okay, and scroll down, there should be a step for publish build artifact. So this is what we select. Click over here and it says path to publish. So click again and the path is same. Okay, this is fine. But inside that, so this particular path is there is an environment variable for this, which is build.artifact staging directory. We are in the staging directory at the moment. It will be provisioned on the runtime when the build will be executed. And inside that, because we know that npm build command generates a new build folder, right? So that's why we'll add the build to it. Okay, so that it will be published inside the build folder. And then artifact name, give it a name so that we can use this name in the later stages. So just keep it drop as default. And artifact publish location, keep it default Azure Pipelines because this will be published on the Azure pipeline itself. So that's fine. Okay, now add the next step to do the application deployment. We'll also create a release pipeline later on, but for now, we'll create the entire CI/CD pipeline within this step. So let's click over here and add the step for app service or web app, right? So it says Azure App Service deploy. Select this one. Okay. Now display name is App Service deploy. Connection type is resource manager. And over here we have to select our Azure service connection. So what happens is, when you are connecting your Azure portal to Azure DevOps, it requires a service connection, right? And it has to be authenticated. So that authentication is provided by service principal. Service principal is an entity which has certain permissions attached to it. So you create your service principal in Azure portal, assign some permissions to it, and using that service principal, we create the service connection over here. But for now, okay, let me try to explain it with the help of an example. Okay, so this is our, let's say this is our Azure DevOps, okay, ADO. And over here, this is our Azure portal. So you need some sort of connection, because what we'll be doing is, with the help of Azure DevOps, we'll be deploying the application inside Azure portal, right? So we need a secure connection over here. So that connection is the service connection, right? But to create that service connection, we need some sort of permissions, like what that service connection can do. Like it can deploy the app, or it can delete the app, it can recreate the app, it can read the app, but what all apps it can perform those operation on, and what type of permission does it need, right? So that's why in Azure portal we create the service principal, SPN. We create it, we assign some permissions to it. Like for now, we'll be assigning the collaborator permission, which is a wider permission, but you can customize it as per your need. There'll be a separate video dedicated on Azure security, and that will look into that permission thing into detail. But for now, just understand this service principal will have some permissions to perform certain actions on Azure resource. If you have worked with AWS, this is similar to AWS role. Or if you are a Linux user, this is similar to a functional ID in Linux, right? So we create that service principal over here, and using that service principal, we create the service connection in Azure DevOps. So this is how it works. This is a two-way connection that it established, and we can either create service principal from portal over here, or if you have admin access in Azure DevOps, you can directly create the service connection from here, and it will generate a service principal. So let's go back to our Azure portal. I hope this is making sense now, right? Over here where it says Azure subscription, and if you see the drop down, it says two options: Azure subscription, which is this one, or available Azure service connection. We don't have service connection created yet. So that's why if we select this option, it will ask you to click authorize to configure the service connection. If I didn't have the required permission, it won't let me do the authorize action from here, and I have to basically go into Azure portal and provision the service principal. But I do have the permission, so that's why I can do it from here. So click over here, authorize, and it will ask me to log into my Microsoft ID. So this is the same ID that I have used to log into the Azure portal. So let me do the sign in. Okay, and it's just authorizing at the moment and configuring the Azure service connection. Okay, I guess it has created it. So if you click on the drop down again, it has created with the same name, but it's now available inside Azure service connections. And I don't see any warning message over here. So good. Now app service type, whether we want web app on Windows, Linux, or containers, the same thing that was asked from the Azure portal when we were provisioning the infra. Um, or we can also create mobile app, API app, or function app. So let's go ahead with the default option, web app on Linux. Now, how Azure DevOps will know what Azure App Service have been created in Azure portal? It does that with the help of service connection that we just created. So that service connection basically created a two-way communication channel between Azure portal and Azure DevOps. And Azure portal is able to send the details to Azure DevOps, and Azure DevOps is able to request those details from Azure portal, whatever it needs, based on the access that it has, right? So it has the read permission. That is why if we click on the drop down, we should see the apps over here. So these are the two web apps that is available in my Azure subscription. So that is why it is available. So the one that we created right now for this demo is this one. So I'll select that. It is asking me to deploy to slot. I will get back to this in few minutes, but for now, just keep it default. Now, package or folder, in which folder the code will be built. So again, click on these three buttons, and basically it has to be the build folder. So I'll remove these options and build. Okay. And then select the runtime stack. Now there are different options. So just again, select the runtime stack as node. Let's select node 18. Okay. And that's it for the job configuration. So we have created the pipeline, we have created different stages, and then we have created different tasks inside those stages. If you go over here where it says variables, right, there are some variables available over here for you to use. These are some default variables. Collection ID system.debug equal to false. This is really important. If you have to enable debug logs in your Azure DevOps pipeline, then you just edit the pipeline and change this option from false to true, and it will enable the debug logs. It will be really handy when you are facing any issues with your pipeline or you are troubleshooting the pipeline failure. It comes really handy. So in that case, you can keep it true. Right? And then there are some other options as well. So, and you can add more variables to it. These are the system defined variables. Then there is trigger. By default, the continuous integration is not enabled. But if we click on this, we'll click on that later on. But if we click on that, it will enable the continuous integration on this pipeline. You see how simple it is to enable the CI. If you were working in Jenkins, you have to set up a webhook between Jenkins and GitHub repository, and which will basically then enables this functionality. But over here, it's just with the click of a button, you can enable the CI because it has access to Azure Repo. It is within the same project and it has all the required access, right? This is CI, but then you can also create the build based on the schedule, right? If you click over here and you can set up a schedule, like at what time, at what day you want your build to be run, right? You can customize it as per your need. Okay, and then you can add the build completion as well, like build this project when any other project is completed. Currently, this project does not have any other CI pipeline. That is why it is not highlighted, but otherwise it would have shown. So these are all the triggers available. Then if we go to options, we have again certain options like linking the work item to this build, create work item on failure, like which will create like a work item inside Azure boards, and which will have a task for someone to look into the build failure, right? So we can enable that as well. And we can set different options like build job timeout in minutes. That means if the build does not completed in next 60 minutes, it will fail the build. And build job cancel timeout as well. Hmm. Then there'll be the history, like all the changes that's been made. Currently we have not run it at this moment, so that's why it is blank. But over here will be all the details. So let me verify it one more time and then we'll execute the pipeline. Okay, this looks good. Now hit over here where it says save and queue. You can either just save it or save and queue. That means save and trigger the pipeline. So let's go ahead with that option. And you can add a comment like, why are you running this pipeline? Let's call it initial trigger. Right, and you can change certain options at the runtime as well, like agent pool that you want run on your pipeline, agent specification, branch, and so on. And you can change the variables at the runtime as well. Like let's say if I want this particular build to be run as debug, so I can just click over here and change the variable. For now, just Let's just go ahead with these options and click over here which says save and run. All right, once you do that, it will be visible something like this over here. You can click on that, and these are all the logs that will be generated. So currently it's trying to acquire the agent from the Microsoft hosted agent pool. So that's why it will wait for a few seconds. Had it been a self-hosted agent, it should be instantaneous because you have your agent running and it is up and running to serve the request. But it there is just a slight delay if you use the Microsoft hosted agent, but it picked it up. So first step, it initialized the job. Second step, it did the checkout, the project checkout, like few commands, git version, git init, and then git remote add origin, all those things, and finally it did the git checkout. Okay, and then the next step, npm install. It did run the npm build and it was successful. I don't see any errors. There are some warnings, but that's okay. Then now it is running npm build. Right, if you click over there, still running. It will take some time, so let's wait for it to finish. Okay, it took basically 26 seconds, and see, the build is completed. It says the project was built on the root directory, right? Files have been generated, and you can just run npm serve command to serve it. But now we see a red cross over here on the publish artifact. That means this particular step has been failed and the later steps are skipped. So the deployment step is the skipped because this step has been failed. So let's have a look at that. Click on that. It says not found path to publish, which is this one. I guess I made a mistake. Let's go back. Hit edit pipeline. Okay, and now go to this tab, publish build artifact. Okay, so where it says path to publish, it should be just build. So by default, it takes this root directory as the prefix. So by default, it will be in this particular directory where all the source code resides, and inside that there was build folder that was created after the build was run. So that's why I just have to write build over here, and it should take care of it. Now let's hit save and queue again. Save and run, and then let's go to logs. Now I'll pause the video here and let it finish. All right, so I have waited for a couple of minutes and this has been completed now. So if you see the publish build artifact stage that was failed before, now it is completed. It says it has uploaded 8 files including the folders at this particular location. From this location, this is nothing but the so this is nothing but the staging directory, and this is the container drop location, which is where the artifacts will be published. And I will show you how you can see that. And the next step is Azure App Service deploy. If you click on that, you see it has been deployed successfully, and the app service application URL should be accessible at this URL, which is what we have configured for our web app. So let's click over that. So let me press Control and click, and it should open in a new window. Ideally, your app should be running over here. I wanted you to see this. Why my application is not hosted over here and why it is showing the default homepage of Azure Web App. It's because by default, Azure App Service enables the local caching, and we have to disable it by setting the environment variable. So let's go back to Azure portal. Okay. Over here, you scroll down and go to this section which says configuration. So over here, you need to add a couple of settings. So these application settings are nothing but the environment variables. Click over here, new application setting, give it a name and value. The first is website dynamic cache. Set this to 0. Okay. Click OK and enable this as well. We'll use that in the later part of the video. Click OK. Create one more application setting, and this time cache option, right? And set the value to never so that it does not locally cache the website data. Click OK. Once you do that, this is what we needed to do. And let me enable the deployment slot for this as well. Once you do that, hit save and hit continue. It will restart your application as well to make the changes. But if it doesn't, let me restart it from my side. Go to overview and do not just use restart, instead use stop. Should be quick, and then start. Same button, and it is started. Now let's visit the URL again. Okay. It does not show the details. Let's try to run the CI pipeline again. Then it should be visible because it is still using that data, still has not updated it. So let's go back to the pipeline. Okay. So on the right side, you can click on run pipeline, hit run, and let me pause the recording till it's completed. So the pipeline just got completed, but I just remembered I made one more mistake. So let me go back and fix that mistake. Now let's edit the pipeline and go to the deployment step. Scroll down. You see where I have selected the runtime stack. This should be static side instead of node 18 or any node version. So click over to the drop down, go to the very bottom of it, and there is an option which says static side. So use this as a runtime. Hit save and queue. Hit save and run. This should work now. So let me pause the recording again. Right, so looks like the pipeline has been completed now. Let's see, I don't see any errors. So let's try to access the URL now. Okay, finally our application is up and running and we can go and check it out, anything that we want. So you see the videos are being populated and you can play it as well. I don't want to play because I don't want to get the copyright strike on my video. So let's go back and you can just have fun with it. So we have seen the classic pipeline editor. Now we'll see the YAML pipeline. So let's go back to our Azure portal. I'll just hit back from here, click over to the pipeline. And if you click on three dots over here, you will see an option to export to pipeline, export to YAML or JSON. That's one thing. Click over there. And basically, this is the YAML code generated from our classic pipeline. So this is one way to create the pipeline, but this is not a good practice. You will not be creating classic editor first and then creating the pipeline out of it. Instead, what you can do is, let me show you other step. Okay, so let's go back to our pipeline, hit new pipeline, and select Azure Repos Git this time. Okay, select your repository. Now it will ask you to configure your pipeline with the template. On the bottom of the page, there are two options: starter pipeline or existing Azure pipeline YAML file. So I'll go ahead with this starter template, starter pipeline. Okay, click over there and it will generate a basic pipeline structure for you, such as trigger, pool, steps, and script. Now let's see how we can add further steps to it. So before starting the YAML pipeline, let's quickly see the structure of a YAML pipeline, like all the different key terms involved in the YAML pipeline. Okay, so the pipeline has a trigger which says, okay, this is the time to trigger the pipeline. It could be manual trigger, it could be from the continuous integration or a scheduled trigger. So this will trigger the pipeline. Pipeline will have multiple stages, like these stages, such as build, test, deploy. So these are nothing but stages in a pipeline. Then a stage can have multiple jobs, job one, job two. This is just a way to organize different stages into multiple jobs, and each job run on a agent. These jobs can run on agentless as well, but mostly these jobs run on an agent, right? These agents such as Ubuntu, Windows, or Mac OS. All of these are agents. So these jobs can further be divided into steps. Now, steps can either be a script or a task. Script could be an inline script, such as, just run ls-lrt, because I want to see what are the content of the directory after the deployment is completed. So you run a script or you run a task. Tasks such as invoke a REST API or deploy app service. These are the tasks. Now we'll see that in the pipeline itself, how to create it from the scratch. Okay, so I'll open a new file, select the language as YAML. So first start with a trigger. Let's put the trigger on the main branch. So this trigger enables the continuous integration. Okay, now press enter and basically starts stages, and then hit enter, hyphen stage, colon, name of the stage, let's call it build stage. Hit enter again, press tab to keep the cursor at the stage level, and then write jobs. Now we'll be adding jobs. Hit enter and do the same again, add the job and call it build. So this is a build job. Now because we will be using some agent that will run on job to execute some steps, so let's go to the jobs again, and at the same level write pool, and then press a tab and then enter VM image. VM image is Ubuntu latest. Let's copy these two lines and paste it in the deploy stage as well. And tab. Okay. Now the basic structure of the pipeline is completed. We have build stage, we have deploy stage, and we have build and deploy job. Inside that, now we need to add the steps to run npm build, npm install, publish artifact, and deploy the artifacts, right? So I'll just copy this and I'll go back to our pipeline. I'll copy everything, paste it over here, right? So at the pool level, steps, and then colon, press enter, then hyphen. Okay, now keep your cursor over here. Okay, keep your cursor over here, and now we have to add the npm build step. So what we'll do is we go to the right where it says show assistance, click over there, and now it will show you some steps that were pre-built for you, and you just have to enter details and it will populate some values for you. So let's see how it works. Search for npm. Okay, select the step and use the command install. Working folder, let's keep it default because our package.json is in the same folder, and rest everything is default, and click over add. Now once you do that, you see there is a task generated for you, an npm task. So you copy that or cut that and you paste it over here inside the steps and intend it properly. Tab. That was the first task. The next task is npm build. So you can do the same inside the same step. Copy it, enter, paste. And now this time the command should be run build. So the build is completed. Now the next one should be hit enter. Okay. And now again select the task. Again select the task as publish artifact. Publish build artifact over here. Okay. Now the directory path to publish was build. Artifact name was drop. This default. Hit add. Once you do that, there'll be a task created for you for publish build artifacts as well. And with all the details populated. Now it's been published. Now the next step is deploy. So again, keep your cursor over here at the pool level and then add steps, enter, and then again search for a task. This time it should be web app, Azure App Service. Okay, now select the service connection. Okay, I'll select the first one, web app on Linux. App service name is this one, and then package or folder should be build. Runtime stack should be static. Oh, here it is, static, and click add. Okay, so now this task has been added. Now let me copy this again so that I can show you this properly in the VS Code. This is not as difficult, right? You just have to understand the structure, the difference between stages, job, steps, and that should be good. And you see the details are getting auto populated for you, right? So we have the trigger over here, then we have stages. First stage is build. Inside that there is a job build job which runs on Ubuntu latest agent. Then we have the step to run npm install and npm run build. Then it will publish the artifact, and the artifact name will be drop. Publish location, it will be in a container. Then we'll have a deploy stage. Let me the lines from here. Okay. Deploy stage, it will have a deploy job similarly, and then it will have a task, Azure RM web deployment, and it will have a service connection. You'll have the app type name, a web app name, and few other details, right? I just made a mistake. Like this package path should be this one, system default directory, and then build. So I'll make the changes over here. Now everything is good. I have copied it. Gone back to my pipeline YAML over here. Then paste the content. On the right side, there is an option to save. You can save it and hit on view details. Says there is some issues with the pipeline. Click on edit. It also validates the changes. If you click on right side, you can click on validate. It says unexpected value main line 1 column 10. So this trigger is not a valid one. Okay, I guess I know what the issue is. It should be on the next line like this, because trigger could be on multiple branches. So we can separate those branches like this. Okay, now let's hit save and run. Yeah, okay. So now you will see in a much better view. So you see it's now been divided into different stages. So first is build. Click on that. Okay, it's acquiring the agent, the build, and then there'll be deploy. So now it has a much cleaner view, much nicer view, divided into multiple jobs and stages, because that's how we have configured it. This job failed at the npm step, and it says unknown command run build. So I made a mistake in the YAML. Let's go back and hit on these three dots, click on edit pipeline. Oh, I guess I know why that is, because this is not, so it also shows you the details of the error. For example, if you hover your mouse over here, it will show you that value is not accepted. Valid values are CI, install, publish, and custom, because that was a custom command, right? So I'll just place it with custom. Okay, hit enter, and custom command. Okay, custom command is run build. Now I don't see any highlighted warning or errors. So let's validate it first. Okay, validation. Okay, now let's save. Other than that, we need to make one more change. You see, because these stages are running independently of each other, That means artifact produced from one stage is not accessible to another stage. That's why we did publish artifact on stage A, but then on stage B, which is stage deploy, we have to download the artifact as well. So inside step over here, I'll add one more line. Okay, and I'll search the step for download build artifact over here. Let's select this current build and specific artifact. So artifact name was drop, and then from the destination directory, good. Okay, so let's click on add. Now it added one more task, which is download build artifact, and it will download the build type as current, download type single, artifact name is drop, download path is this artifact directory, and the deployment should be done from the same directory, right? From where we are running it. So let's copy artifact directory and replace it over here, or we can download in the default working directory, fine as well. And this should be drop over here, save. Let me pause the recording for a couple of minutes. Okay, so around after 1.5 minutes, both the stages has been completed and the pipeline itself is completed. I see everything is green now. So let's click over to the build stage over here and see everything has been completed. And if we can go back, scroll down, right, you see one artifact. So this is nothing but our build that was published in first stage when we compiled it, and it will be available from the pipeline run. And let's click on the deploy stage, and deploy is also completed. This is the development. So it first downloaded the build from the previous stage and then it actually deployed it. So if we look at that, let's visit the application service URL and see if it is working or not. Open it in new tab, and yes, it is working. Finally, it is working, and I'm glad it is working. So thank you so much for your patience so far. Uh, I intended to complete the entire build and release pipeline as part of this video, but this video has taken a longer time that I expected because we discussed a lot of things between, a lot of concepts as well, including the demo. So that's why it took us a long time. So what we have completed till now is still here, and we are left with the release pipeline, deployment slots, blue green deployment, deployment quality gates, and so on. So this would take around 30-45 minutes or so. So it will be better if we cover that in the next video so that you don't get overwhelmed at once. So with that being said, I will conclude today's video at this point, and I will see you tomorrow with the rest of the topics that were pending in this particular video, that is release pipelines and all of the related concepts. And yes, everything will be demo using the same web app. So I'll do the resource cleanup now, and I suggest you do the same if you are following the video along. To save the cost, please clean up the resources, please clean up the resource group, and everything else will be cleaned automatically. So I will see you soon tomorrow with the next video. If you have any question, you know how to reach out to me, you know how to share your feedback. All the notes will be uploaded to the day 4 folder itself, so do check that out in a couple of hours maybe, and it will be there. So yeah, thank you so much. I will see you tomorrow.